Some entries on this iceberg are very, very old and therefore have very little information to them. So, of course, some entries will have more details and some will have less. And then we start with tier 1 of the iceberg, the very, very top. We're starting from something from my little home country, Sweden! Yay! And yeah, so the first name we got on our little list on tier 1 is Adolf Fredrik. He was king in Sweden in the 1700s. He had himself a little ball. It was Lent, I think it's called in English, fastan, and you were supposed to really have a big old buffet and eat all you wanted. So he had lobster, he had caviar, he had champagne, all of that. But at the end of the night, he was still not super satisfied, so he wanted one of those Swedish delicacies that we still eat today during spring. It's called a semla. This is what that looks like. But the semla during his day was actually also put into a plate and filled with warm milk around it. And just one of those is like a heart attack waiting to happen, but he ate 14 of them and it dispatched him into eternity. Number 2 on our little list is everyone's favorite Russian mad monk, Grigory Rasputin. He was both loved and hated during his days. He's also well known for being very hard to kill. So, the evening of his death went as follows. First, he came home to a man named Felix. I don't really remember, but I'll put his face here. He had invited Rasputin over for some food and drink. And that he got. He got himself some cake, he got himself some tea, some wine, all of them spiked with cyanide. And to everyone's surprise, this didn't touch Rasputin at all. He was just sitting there, completely alive, you know. Whee! So they did what they had to do. They went and got themselves a gun and shot Rasputin in his chest. Then they wandered off for a little bit, but when they returned, Rasputin shot up from his lying position and was very much still alive. And he was mad as the mad monk could be, and he started chasing Felix and the other poor people out into the snow of Russia, and there they shot him again. This time might have killed Rasputin, finally. But there's some stories going around, because then they took him up and throweth him into a river. When they took his body up, I don't know, it says different things. Some say that he had water in his lungs, or that his body had converted in a weird way that would suggest that he had been alive when he was thrown into the lake. Yeah. Either way, our lovely house monk wasn't the easiest of targets. Now moving on. Now we're in Greece, and I can't for the life of me pronounce these names, but I'll try my best.
Achilles. Achilles. It's written like this. Achilles.
Yeah, he was a Greek man, and he had been told by a prophet that he would die on a certain day. In a very specific way, he would have a house fall upon his head. But Achilles was a smart man. he decided to stay outside the entire day because no house is gonna fall upon his head when he's outside. But you can't run away from fate. What happened was that okay, first of all, he was very bald. This man, this Greek man that I can't pronounce, he had a very bald, shiny head. A bird had caught himself a tasty turtle that he wanted to eat. And when he saw the shiny bald head of Achilles, he mistook it for a hard rock. What the birds would do usually is release the turtle down upon the hard rock so that it would smash and they could eat the yummy turtle inside. But of course, this was not a hard rock. This was our Greek man who got the turtle thrown on his head, and then and there he was cancelled. Just like that. And the prophecy went true, because what are the shells of turtles if not their little homes? And then we have number 4. Franz Ferdinand, a name that I can actually pronounce. He was an archduke. And his death was actually the starting point of World War I. The weird part of it is that he survived many assassination attempts. He and his wife Sophie were going on a motorcade with an open car, and there were plenty of assassins placed along the way that the car would go. Well, in short, they were 7 assassins. Most of them failed, some of them just backed out of it. But at some point, the car basically just took a wrong turn. And there, at the wrong turn, was one of the failed assassins sitting at a cafe eating a yummy sandwich. When he suddenly saw Franz and the car, he jumped up and shot him, and actually did the deed that the others had failed to do. But most importantly, what kind of sandwich was it? Did he eat it? Did he take it with him when he ran away? If anyone knows, let me know down below. Now to number 5. There we have another Greek man, a philosopher. And again, I will try my hardest, but Pythagoras was a man that had a weird relationship with beans. That was like, if you ate them and you passed gas, you would pass your life force with that gas. And also, beans contained little lost souls of poor humans that had died. This bean man had enemies, political enemies, old Greek times, everyone had those. And one day he was ambushed and he was chased. He almost got away until he reached a field of growing beans. He just couldn't go and walk upon those beans because it went against his beliefs and moral compass, so he just stopped and let himself be cancelled. And the beans all clapped. And now we're truly moving on, because now we have someone from China. Qin Shi Huang was an emperor in China, and he basically died from ingesting large amounts of mercury because he thought that that would give him eternal life. And he is also very well known for his terracotta army. And the last person on tier 1 is Henry I, another king who died from eating something. This time, he ate something that his physician had specifically told him not to eat. It was a fish called lampreys, and I have no idea what that is, so I'll Google it now.
Let's do it.
That's one gross fish. I understand why he died. It's not a very pretty fish. It's long and it's... yeah. Yay. Well, he fell ill and got convulsions and fever, and he was dispatched into another place. Yeah. So that's the end of the first tier of this iceberg. Now moving on to tier 2. The first name on tier 2 is Alan Pinkerton. Alan Pinkerton was a man's man. He was living a dangerous life. He was a spy, he was a detective, and yeah, you know. The main gist of it is that he had a cool and tough life. And he ended his days by basically being murdered by his wife's poodle. He was out walking his wife's poodle one morning when the poodle started walking around him, twisting his legs, and he fell over, bit his tongue, got sepsis, and took it to the road to more blissful places, containing less of his wife's poodle. Then we have number 2, and that's Edmund Ironside. He died by being stabbed in the butt while sitting on his toilet. His enemy had been sitting down there in the latrine waiting for him, and when opportunity struck, he just went for it and did a good job, I'm guessing. Now to 445 BC, and another Greek, Heraclitus. He had dropsy, and he did not want to have that. So for some reason, he went ahead and smeared himself in cow manure, where he promptly got stuck. And this was a party for the dogs around. They went ahead and attacked him while he was stuck there and ate him.
What fart? My foot is dead. I've been sitting on it. Oh, dear Lord.
In 1410, Martin of Aragon, another king that had way too much to eat, he had eaten an entire goose and was lying in his bed with constipation. His favorite jester walked in trying to cheer him up and told him a joke. And the joke was apparently way too much fun because Martin died of laughter. And we think the constipation, eating of the entire goose, and the joke was just way too much for his body to bear. Number 5, and again, we go back to the Greeks. So yeah, his name was
Xerxes.
Okay. He was a Greek painter and artist, and he also died of laughter. He laughed himself to death over his own painting of the goddess Aphrodite. The woman who had commissioned the painting was an elderly woman, and the woman had insisted on being the model of said painting. So I feel like dying of laughter and dying of eating too much is way more common than I thought. Number 6, we have Safi of Persia. In 1642, he and his rival had a drinking competition, and he just basically drank himself to death. Alcohol poisoning. And now for the last one today, number 7, Saint Lawrence. He was a martyr. He was sentenced to death by being roasted on a grill. While he was being roasted, he told his captors that he was done on this side and they could turn him over. Kinda badass actually. No perkele, tappar alla mina saker. I'm dropping my things. So, the first entry on our tier 3 is the dancing plague. It happened through July to September in France, when a woman called Frau Trofea suddenly just started dancing uncontrollably. Her moves must have been enchanting enough for the rest of the village to join in on the fun, but the fun did not last, and it's rumored, I guess, because this was in 1500s, that 400 people during the dancing plague danced themselves to death. So this was either a case of mass hysteria. Smarty-pantsy people of the time said demonic possession. And smarty-party-pantsy people from today said that it could have been a fungus, an ergofungi, that made them all mad, of course, and they'd all started dancing. A fun fungus to have. After that, we jump to Henry Taylor. In 1872, Henry Taylor was a pallbearer. I think that's the right word. He was carrying a coffin of someone recently cancelled, and whilst doing it, he stumbled upon a rock which made him stumble, which in turn made everyone else carrying it just let go of the coffin, and it fell straight upon poor Henry Taylor. Pretty ironic. From that, we jump to Basil I. He died in the year 886 when he was out hunting and somehow got stuck in a deer's antlers and was then just dragged by the deer for 25 kilometers. But this did not kill Basil. He died of a fever later on caused by the dragging. Then we have Charles II of Navarre. He was ill, and we all know that medical practices way back in the days weren't always the best at all, even the slightest bit of the best. He asked his physician what to do, and he said that he should be wrapped into an alcohol-soaked big cloth, and a handmaid was there to sew him into this alcohol-soaked cloth, so he was an entire little cocoon of fabric and alcohol. The handmaid noticed that there was a loose little thread, and we can't have that, and instead of just cutting the thread, she went ahead and tried to burn it off, and you know, fire and alcohol don't mix. He didn't have much of a chance, and he burned alive inside of his little cocoon. Then we jump to another one of those cool guy daredevil types. His name was Bobby Leach.
Leach. Bobby Leach or Leach? Yeah.
Either way, he was a stuntman. He was the second person to jump down the Niagara Falls in a barrel, but in the end, in 1920, he died from slipping on an orange peel, got gangrene, and perished. The Niagara Falls couldn't take him, but goddamn, those orange peels, man. Then we move on to my home country again. We're in Sweden, but also Denmark. Ragnar Lodbrok. He was a Viking, and he was king, you could say, of Sweden and Denmark. And at some point, he went down to what today is called London. And there he was thrown into a pit of snakes. Yeah, and that's how he succumbed. And then we move on again. This time we have a Greek man that I think that I can actually pronounce. Yay! Weirdly enough, Tier 3 doesn't have a lot of weird names from Greece, like last video. This was Draco of, I'm gonna say Draco of Athens, and I'm just gonna imagine him as Draco from Harry Potter, because that's fun. He was a politician, and from all accounts, he was a very well-liked politician at that, because he died whilst on a stage. The people of Athens were so enthralled that they threw cloaks and hats on him, as was the custom, to show appreciation. And this actually became too much that it smothered him. He died of too much appreciation. And then we move on to Molière, known as a great comedian. He was on stage performing his last play, known as The Imaginary Invalid, ironically enough, when he suddenly collapsed, coughing and hemorrhaging. He did not want to stop the play though, and just to give the picture, there were ballet dancers dancing around the stage and stuff like that, and he continued until he at the end collapsed again, and of course went ahead and perished just a few hours later. And we end Tier 3 with the molasses flood victims. In 1919, there was this, in Boston, large storage tank filled with 2.3 million US gallons. On an extremely warm day, the structure collapsed, and the mass of this sticky, sugary molasses flooded down into Boston. You can just imagine the humans, the cars, the animals in the way of this flood. They were pretty much stuck in place and couldn't do heckin' anything. 21 people died and 150 people were injured during this insane tragedy. So that was Tier 3. Let's jump into Tier 4 and the last tier for today. We're starting off with the Greek. Let's see if I can pronounce it. It's Charonodas. Damn it. Mr. Greek man Charonodas was a politician, and he made laws. And one of the laws he made was that you couldn't carry any weapons into public assembly. This would be his own downfall, because one day he forgot that he was actually carrying a sword into public assembly. Not wanting to be the kind of person who doesn't follow his own principles, he promptly took his sword and cancelled himself then and there. Whew, what a guy. Then we go ahead into the next Greek on Tier 4. It's Claudius Drusus. Not too hard to pronounce. Died in 1882 AD. His age during his cancellation is unknown, but a contemporary writer wrote as thus. Just before manhood, he choked on a pear he playfully threw up and caught with his mouth. How small were these pears during 20 AD? And we move promptly on to France, and there we have Louis III of France. he went ahead and cancelled in 882. He was chasing a girl around his father's estate. He was 17 and hormonal at the time. Whilst chasing said girl, he failed to notice how low a door was and hit his head, which of course resulted in his demise. Otherwise, we wouldn't have him here on this list. And then we move on to maybe the least historical death that I've had on my list so far, Sherwood Anderson. He was an American writer, and whilst he was on an adventure somewhere, being a cool writer man, he started feeling pains in his stomach. Turns out he had swallowed a toothpick, and it had caused enough damage to cause an infection, which led to his exiting from this world. We jump down to 1809, and a man who really liked the circus. His name was John. Now I can't even pronounce John. John Cummings. He had went to the circus. That was like a thing. Everyone loved a good old circus. And he had seen some people who swallowed swords. And he was like, awesome, I want to do that thing. And he started doing it. First, he swallowed 3 swords. Went fine. They passed through his system. And then he swallowed 14 of them, which also passed through his system. I'd say he was pretty dang lucky. For kicking heck. It wasn't until he swallowed 20 swords in one go that 4 years of pain and suffering began. At the end of these 4 years, I don't even need to say what happened. And the autopsy found the fragments of said swords in his stomach. Then we go to Empress Elizabeth of Austria. She was not only known for being very beautiful, she had long hair and a fashion symbol of her time. That didn't stop people from trying to hurt her. Because why would it? There's always people who want to do that. So, a man had found out where she was out walking, and he staged a little stumble, and he played it off that he stumbled like next to her, but in reality he had a very small knife that he stabbed her with. And Empress Elizabeth actually didn't notice anything for quite a while. She kept on walking because her corset kept the blood from exiting for quite a while. So she walked for a bit before she actually collapsed and went her way into better pastures. Yeah. Then we have Valentian I, 375 AD. He was actually a Roman emperor. Like, give way for the Romans this time. Either way, he just died because he was so angry that he yelled too much and had himself a stroke. Yeah, that's a kinda it. But it's weird for a Roman emperor to die in such a natural way, I guess. Yelling, not getting stabbed 40 times in the back, you know. Next one on this tier is Isadora Duncan, an American actress. In 1927, she was strangled to cancellation by her own very long scarf that got tangled into the automobile that she was riding. That's pretty much it. Sad. And then we come to Portia, or Porcia. Porcia. Well, let's say Portia. In 43 BC, she swallowed a bunch of hot coal in a bid for self-cancellation, which succeeded. Ouch. And then we come to the absolute last entry on tier 4 and the last entry for this episode. This takes place in 1909. A young teenager, only 15, called George Spencer Millett. During these days, young 15-year-old boys had jobs, and so he worked at an office. This was actually his 15th birthday, nonetheless. And he went to greener pastures by all the females in his office decided that they wanted to give him birthday kisses. He wasn't thrilled and tried to run away from this pile of ladies hunting him down through the office until he sadly tripped over and he had an ink eraser in his pocket that stabbed him in the heart, killing him instantly. I guess that is a very unfortunate way to go way too young and a great way to end part 2 of the iceberg. We start tier 5 with one of those names again that is hard to pronounce. Al-Mustasim. He was a caliph or a ruler of Iraq in the 1200s. In 1258, he was captured in, I think, Baghdad and was ordered to be executed, as one would be. But the thing was, they had this idea that, quote-unquote, the earth would be offended by being touched by royal blood. So they came up with the genius idea to roll Al-Mustasim into a carpet and then just run him over and over again with some horses. Problem solved. Next on our little list here we have Tycho Brahe, who was a Danish astronomer. In 1601, Mr. Brahe attended a fancy banquet, and it was a very fancy affair indeed. Was many hours long, as they usually were. He sat down the entire time because he found it to be rude to answer the call of nature, which led to him then politely dying 11 days later by bladder failure. Hydration break! Please, my loves, keep hydrated. So good for you to drink some water. Please.
Drink water, but also pee.
Oh.
This has been a public announcement.
Third on our list, we have Mary Reeser, also known as the Cinder Lady. She is a very well-known name when it comes to the whole mystery of spontaneous human combustion. Either way, she was found in 1951 inside of her apartment, mostly a big pile of ashes in the chair, or the remains of the chair that she had been sitting in. The room was unaffected by the fire, as well as her left foot, which was also still wearing its slipper. Promptly moving on, now we have another daredevil on our hands. Franz Reichelt. He was a tailor who also fancied himself somewhat of an inventor of sorts. So much that he was also known as the Flying Tailor. Either way, he invented himself a parachute suit. That's actually very catchy. A parachute suit. He made one. And he insisted for a very long time to get permission to jump off the Eiffel Tower to test his parachute suit. Franz was not one to be denied, and finally, in 1912, he did get permission. Only that he wouldn't do it himself, he would use a dummy. But it was hard to tell him no once he was up there. He insisted once again. He liked to insist, he demanded it, that he would be the one jumping off the Eiffel Tower with his parachute suit. We have a video of that, it's very grainy, I'll show it. Sadly, he did get what he wanted and he jumped off the Eiffel Tower in his little suit straight into the cancellation of his life subscription. Then we have number 5 on tier 5. And there we have Antifanes. I'm gonna say Antifanes. I'm not even gonna try. Antifanes. And he lived circa 300 BC. And there's like no information almost. We don't have a picture, we don't have anything, but he was a Greek comedic writer and he met his demise by being struck by a pear. Yeah, just being struck by a pear. And let me just go back to part 2. How small or large were these hecking pears during the ancient times? Is it small enough to accidentally choke a person? Or like big enough to strike someone quite dead? My head hurts. And then we jump to number 6. And that is John Baptiste Lully. He was an Italian-French composer in the 1600s. And in 1687, whilst conducting a musical performance in honor of King Louis' successful recovery from some surgery, he managed to strike his own foot very, 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 very hard with his conducting staff. Somehow. Either way, this brought on a severe infection onto his poor foot. The doctors advised that he would need to amputate or else the infection would get worse. But Baptiste was adamant that they did not amputate his foot because then he would never be able to dance again. Which he never got to do anyway because it spread, he got gangrene and was shoved off this mortal coil. Listen to doctors, you people. In number 7, we have a name that would fit a cat. Probably one of those that look very angry and has a mustache, you know. Yeah, those kinds of cats. But this was a man. He was an American politician and founding father. Even with these credentials, he wasn't the smartest, the best in judgments. He had a blockage in his urethra and he just wanted that fixed as soon as possible. So he went ahead and borrowed a whalebone from his wife's corset and used that to pick inside of his blocked urethra. This caused internal damage, which then caused infection And then, of course, the regular old cancellation.
Cool. Cool.
At number 8 we have Wallingham. Clement Wallingham. Clement Wallingham, and he was an American lawyer. And he moved on to greener pastures by accidentally shooting himself in the stomach while trying to prove his client's innocence, using the gun and trying to prove that the victim had actually accidentally shot himself, and Clement tried to prove it and promptly proved it by doing the exact same thing and moving on. The good thing is that the defendant got released and he proved his point. So yay! He did not die in vain. In number 9 we have Sir Thomas Erguhart. Either way, he was a Scottish aristocrat that laughed himself to death in 1660 when he heard that Charles II was coming back on the throne. I have no idea why that was so much fun, but I'm really glad that we got at least one death by laughter. And the last person on our little list here, and for this episode, in number 10, is a man called
Nicholas
Comper. He was an English aviator. Another one of those daredevil cool guys. But he was a bit of a jokester. Maybe a little bit too much of a jokester. No, not a maybe. He was too much of a jokester. He was out and about. He had been thrown out of a bar, I think, for trying to light fireworks inside. So he went outside to try and light fireworks. And a passerby asked him what he was doing. And Nicholas Comper joked that he was part of the IRA and that he was there to blow up the town hall. The passerby got so spooked that he somehow kicked or pushed or whatever poor Comper to the ground so hard that he hit his head and later passed into cancellation from Swedish hemorrhage of brain blood. Yes. So, dear friends, let's jump straight on into tier 6 of the Weird Deaths iceberg. And we all know that it just gets weirder and weirder the further down we go. So, let's start. Number 1 on tier 6 is Alexander, Emperor of Byzantium. The tales of this particular man was that he managed to be an emperor for only 13 short months. He did not die an honorable death, as you would imagine an emperor doing during these days. This was like 900 AD times. No. He died of exhaustion after what must have been a heckin' epic polo match. Or the rumors that he was a bit of a lazy, terrible drunk could have contributed to the yeeting of his life into eternity. And then we move straight on to number 2, another emperor of Byzantine. They're just flocking around down here in tier 6. He was John II Komnenos. You know me and pronunciations, I don't get along with them. Either way, he was just another one of those unlucky emperors, and he reached the Valley of Death in 1143 by cutting himself on an arrow, a poisoned arrow, meant for the boars that he was out hunting. He promptly ignored that little poisonous scratch, which we now know was quite a fatal mistake. It led to sepsis and, of course, his unavoidable cancellation. Could we just learn to not ignore possible wounds that could turn into gangrene or sepsis? Because we've had too much of that in these lists. I'm tired of them, actually. Then we move on to number 3 on our little list, and this is not a Byzantine emperor at all. No. We have a baronet, a Sir William Payne Galway. He sustained life-cancelling injuries by tripping and falling upon a turnip. This was in 1881, and the turnips caused such internal injuries that he got cancelled. So yeah, death by turnip. Very frightful stuff. On number 4, we have Eleazar Avaron. And to be quite clear, we have almost zero info about the man himself, except that he was a soldier. Just a stab in the dark there, but in 162 BC, way long time ago, he was written into the history books thanks to the way he managed to become unalived. It was a battle in what was today around Israel, and he had a spear, a mighty spear. During these times, people were warring with elephants, and he saw an elephant, and he thought, hey, death to that elephant. And he did that. He killed that elephant with his mighty spear. Problem is that the elephant died so promptly that it also fell straight upon our main man of the story. And thus, the poor elephant and dear Eleazar together achieved a double cancellation. The best part about researching that topic is all the ways that people would actually draw elephants through history. I can't be the only one having to see all of that, so here you go. Let's have an ugly elephant intermezzo. Yes, quite indeed, very fun. We're having a grand old time here on my channel today. You're welcome. Moving on to number 5 on tier 6. We have an unidentified man in Hawaii, 1903. All we know is that this poor man was suffering from malaria. The local priest did not agree on the doctor's expertise and decided that the malaria-stricken man obviously was possessed by demons and needed to be put through a rigorous round of exorcism. And what was this priest's weapon of choice for these demons hiding in the malaria-stricken man? His very heavy Bible. There we go. So this is the only time in history that we know of that someone was beaten into the valley of cancellation by what we would assume to be a very heavy Bible. Carrying on now. Now we go straight to number 6 on tier 6. And here we have Hans Steininger. Yeah, he was a mayor in what would be Germany today, but Austria then, I think. This was in the 1500s. He was actually living the high life, this man, Hans. Yeah, he was chosen as mayor 6 times in a row. Everyone in his small hometown just loved him. On top of that, he had the longest beard around. It was 4 feet. I don't know what that is actually, because I'm Swedish and we do things in meters and centimeters, but yeah, 4 feet. That was it. And he had that epic beard, you know? Living every man's dream, I suppose. This epic beard would soon turn out to be his downfall, quite literally.
Oh shit, should I be joking at a time like this?
As he stepped on it while running up stairs and falling down, breaking his neck. There was a fire going around, and as the mayor, he was running around trying to be helpful, and in the chaos forgot to tuck his beard into his pants, as he would usually do. And the rest is history. Here's a lovely picture of his beard that is actually still somewhere in some museum. I'll write it down when I find what museum it is, because I'm quite sure everyone wants to go there and have a look at it. Yeah. Psst. Before we go to the last one, please like, comment and subscribe. It's free for you and it helps me so much with the algorithm. Thanks. And now we go to the last entry on tier 6 and this episode. I just had to include it even though it's not historic. It's from 1988. And it's the story about Catchy the Poodle in Buenos Aires, 1988. So, this is another death by poodle. If you've seen my previous episodes, we've already been through the very deadly nature of poodles. Either way, Catchy fell 13 stories. Why? We don't know. But in doing so, she also took 3 people with her to that grand farm that dogs go to when they unsubscribe. First of the victims was a 75-year-old lady called Martha. She gained farming status as soon as Catchy came down and hit her on the head. A crowd was gathering to see the spectacle, as I guess it would be seen as, all this going on. One of the people there was Edith, 46, and she also somehow went farming when a bus hit her in that crowd. But it does not end there, of course. A man walked out of an unidentified man. Actually, he walked out of a store and saw the whole thing as it happened. The shock was a bit too much and he promptly gained himself a heart attack. He went ahead and hit that hay in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. 4 lives were taken that day. Catchy and 3 people at the wrong place at the wrong time. Rest in peace, Catchy, and your unlucky victims. I hope your farming excursions are pleasant. So yeah, let's jump straight on into tier 7, and it is the last tier of this iceberg. And number 1 is not a very historical one. It's from 1941, and it's a pilot called Thomas Mattel. So, in this year of whatever you believe in, 1941, a flying object was seen above Florida. I'm guessing over some kind of military operation place. It was unidentified and cylindrical and all those things that we would associate with ETs, UFOs, that kind of fun stuff. Of course, they needed to go ahead and check that out. So they sent 4 fighting jets to go do just that. In one of those jets, of course, we had our very own Thomas Mattel. The 3 other pilots actually gave up chase pretty quickly and returned. But not our Thomas. He continued. He continued so far that at some point he actually became unconscious due to lack of oxygen, and that sent him into a life-ending spiral towards Earth. And thus his heroic life was ended in the pursuit of a UFO. Moving on to number 2 on this tier list, and that is the only confirmed death by meteor. This is supposedly an occurrence that happened in 1888. We don't have much information about it, but it was a man in Iraq, and in 1988, as I just said, an unidentified man in Iraq is honored as the only person to be unsubscribed by a meteor. Short and sweet, that one. And then we move on to number 3. A Greek.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just keep...
And the name that I will not be able to pronounce, which has been kind of a running thread through these videos. Chrysippus of Soli. I'm not gonna say his name again, but there you have it. He was a Greek Stoic philosopher. But he did not remain very stoic in the last moments of his life. In 206 BC, he was a bit intoxicated. So much so that when his eyes caught the image of a donkey somewhere, maybe they had donkeys in their parties, or he was partying outside. I can't tell you that, but there was a donkey, and that donkey was eating figs. When seeing this lovely image, he exclaimed, "Give that donkey some wine to wash those figs down." And then he promptly laughed himself into cancellation from his own joke. I can only guess that his intoxication level was he was partying quite hard. We can all assume. Yes. Whee! Then we move on to number 4 on our list, and there we have a Thornton Jones. This was a man that woke up in 1927 with his throat well and thoroughly nothing unusual so far, until he started crying out to his wife and son, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." At some point he must have lost his speech, because moments before he was unsubscribed, he wrote down on a piece of paper, "I dreamt I did it and woke up."
To found it.
I dreamt I did it and woke up to find it true. What a freaking living nightmare. A sleepwalking sewer slide. Moving on. Now we just have a very gruesome tale for you. In number 5 we have 3 martyrs. They're Sikh martyrs. Bhai Matidas, Bhai Satidas and Bhai Dayala. And they met their faith in 1675. As you can understand, they're martyrs, so they became such by refusing to conform to Islam. They decided to just go cray with these executions. So yeah, I'm gonna tell you all about it. Bhai Matidas, the first one, he was sawed in half from the top. They placed him between 2 structures and, yeah, went at it, so to say. He remained calm through the whole procedure. Then we have Bhai Satidas. He was tied to a pole and then wrapped with cotton and put ablaze. He also remained calm through the entire ordeal. And then we have the last Sikh martyr of this story, Bhai Dayala. The poor man was tied into a bundle with iron chains and then put into a cauldron and boiled alive. He also remained calm through the entire ordeal.
Like, comment and subscribe and hit the notification bell. It's free for you, but helps me. I really want to get monetized. Watch some old videos. We need to get that watch time up. If you have any tips, let me know down below. Either way, let's get back to the morbid fun times.
And now we have 2 left. And in number 6 we have Sigurd Eysteinsson. Me as a Scandinavian person should be able to freaking say this dang name, but I can't. Sigurd Eysteinsson. Okay? Sigurd. Ja. In 800 AD, Sigurd was the main man, the leader of the Viking conquest of northern Scotland. There were many battles to be had. In one of these battles, he conquered his foe who had the lovely nickname the Buck-toothed. Sigurd, so pleased of his win, tooketh the head of his foe and tied it to his saddle so he could ride along and show it off. As one surely did back then. I'm not gonna question it, that sounds pretty on brand actually. Problem was that these buck teeth took their revenge. At some point they scratched Sigurd on his leg and he went into septic shock, which threw him off this mortal coil, probably feeling a bit dumb. And now to number 7 and the last entry of this entire iceberg. We have Francois Vatel. He was a chef and a bit of a do-it-all, I'm guessing, because he had a lot on his plate during this evening in 1671. He had gotten the grand honor of managing and doing the food for the King Louis the Great. He was responsible for 2,000 people at this big old banquet party, which would put anyone into a very stressful mind state. And Francois was undeniably feeling the pressure. At some point during the evening, the seafood didn't arrive. It was late, and the cup runneth completely over for our dear Francois. He committed, cheated himself, unsubscribed from life by running into his own sword. And then, a bit later, his dearly departed remains were found by a servant who had come looking for him to tell him that the seafood had arrived. Hi, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. As usual, please like, comment and subscribe and hit the notification bell, cause it really helps. All the hours I put into editing and then doing all this, you know, like, yeah. I really hope you all enjoy it. And I love it when you let me know that you enjoyed it. I'll be back with Spooktober videos now, that October is upon us. The greatest of times, isn't it? I'm in the mood for spooky days. Either way, love you, you're amazing, thanks for being here, and I'll hope to see you in the next one. Stay hydrated, stay amazing, you're my heroes. Mwah! Giant thanks to all my lovely patrons, and check down below for ways to support my channel. Thanks!